ghoulish ghosts, and vampire bats. That's a $20 value. Absolutely free. We're also going to double your entire order. You just pay a separate fee. We have an extremely limited supply and expect to sell out again. So order yours now.
Call 1-800-928-6857. That's 1-800-928-6857 or visit bylasermagic.com. So call 1-800-928-6857 now.
Hey, man. Oh, nice man cave.
Nacho?
What? Stop it.
Mm-hmm. We've been saving a lot of money ever since we switched to Progressive.
This bar is legit.
And now we get an even bigger discount from bundling home and auto.
I can get used to this.
It might take a minute.
Swing and a miss. Slam dunk. Touchdown. Sports. Time now for our hits and misses of the week. Bill, start us off.
Paul, a miss to the American Bar Association, which seems to be up to its old tricks. It gave a not qualified rating to Steve Gratz, Donald Trump's nominee for the 8th Circuit Court of Appeals. The ABA says it's worried whether Mr. Gratz would be able to detach himself from his deeply held social beliefs on issues like abortion. It twisted a law review article from 1999 to suggest he doesn't believe lower courts should follow precedent. The best act of revenge is to confirm this man, which I think is going to happen.
James.
This is a hit, Paul, to American workers who did a fantastic job in the third quarter, creating more goods and services, productivity finally rising again, up 3%. So let's hope this is the beginning of a trend.
Yeah, that's after a long trough of really mediocre productivity results. And the good jobs report on Friday as well.
That's right.
Kate?
This is a hit for EPA Scott Pruitt, who this week in New Rules said that scientists who get grants from EPA can't sit on advisory boards that advise the agency on scientific decisions. This is being treated as a war on independent science, but for years the agency has been stacking these panels with sycophants who rely on the agency for funding and then rubber stamp whatever EPA wants to do. So this is great for good government, and other agencies like the Food and Drug Administration should do the same thing.
Bill, briefly, good week on judges.
Yeah, very good week. We had 4 appellate court judges confirmed. That's more than President Obama had his entire first year. So they're churning them through.
All right, thank you. That's it for this week's show. Thanks to my panel. Thanks to all of you for watching. I'm Paul Gigot. Hope to see you right here next week.
President Trump embarking on a 5-nation trip to Asia. The president leaving Hawaii after visiting the Pearl Harbor Memorial. And now he's on his way to Japan, the first stop of what will be the longest presidential visit to the region since George H.W. Bush. Hello and welcome to a brand new hour inside America's News Headquarters. I'm Julie Banderas.
And good to be with you. I'm Connell McShane. It's a busy weekend, certainly for the president. He'll be arriving Sunday morning, local time, and when he's there meeting with the Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, that's a lunch meeting, but also a round of golf will be worked in. Now, despite what might be informal settings, North Korea's nuclear ambitions are expected to still be a top priority. Kevin Corke ahead of the president, live for us already in Tokyo with more on this important trip. Kevin.
Hey guys, you're right about that. North Korea and security cooperation, clearly the headlines here. And as far as North Korea is concerned, listen, the administration recognizes they would love to have consensus on what to do about the problem with Pyongyang. But I think a best case scenario, at least according to White House officials, is to just at least acknowledge the fact that we recognize there's a problem and the U.S. would agree not to act in a proactive or provocative manner toward Pyongyang without at least considering the feelings, if nothing else, and certainly consultation with its partners here in the peninsula. Now, as you pointed out, the president is en route here to Asia. Longest trip in about a quarter century for an American president on this continent. He left Hawaii not terribly long ago, a very important stop for the president as he makes his way over this way. Now, before heading this way, the president was actually briefed by leadership from U.S. Pacific Command in Hawaii, then, of course, joining the First Lady for that visit over at Pearl Harbor. I have a photo I want to share with you. Also visiting the memorial there was White House Chief of Staff John Kelly. His son was killed while serving in the Marine Corps in Afghanistan. certainly a solemn reminder of the sacrifice so many have made on behalf of a grateful nation. And I want to share a little behind the scenes, a little behind the curtains, if you will, of what happens in a major trip like this. This is actually a tweet from the U.S. Secret Service. Presidential vehicles being loaded up for the trip here to Asia, including the Beast, as we like to call it. That's the main transport vehicle for the president and the first family. All right, so here's the map. First up, it's Japan and South Korea. Then the president, in addition to looking for unity on this North Korea question, will then head to Beijing, where he's expected to, again, have a very important bilateral with Xi Jinping and hopefully get the Chinese president to get tough on Pyongyang. The president will also make a couple of stops in Vietnam, and then he's expected to extend his trip in the Philippines by a day before making his way home. And trade is another major element of the discussions as the president makes his way here to Asia. As much as we love to talk about the trade imbalance between the U.S. and China, keep in mind Japan and the U.S. have a pretty sizable trade deficit as well. We expect the president to talk about that, bringing its U.S. trade rep along in tow. How about this number? $51 billion. That's the U.S. trade deficit with Japan just this year alone, and that's only through August. That's the latest figures that we have available. So the president's going to try to hammer out a more favorable trade environment for the U.S. and enhance a more equitable trade relationship, not just between the U.S. and Japan, but also with our other partners here in the region. You pointed out something important, a working lunch and a little golf in the offing for the president as he makes his way here. He's very fond of Shinzo Abe. I think it's pretty plain to see. And I think this is an opportunity to further enhance that relationship and talk big time about North Korea. Guys, I'll be here for you. But for now, back to you.
No doubt. Kevin Cork live in what turns out to be an early Sunday morning report there from Tokyo. Julie.
Well, on Monday, the House Ways and Means Committee will start a markup of the Republican tax bill unveiled earlier this week. But some GOP lawmakers are expressing some concern about that plan, especially when it comes to the elimination of some popular tax deductions. Garrett Tenney is live from Washington with more on this. Hi, Garrett.
Hey, Julie. The two changes that are receiving the most blowback at this point deal with the mortgage interest deduction and deducting state and local taxes. Under the plan Republicans unveiled this week, new home buyers will only be able to deduct up to $500,000 of their mortgage instead of the current cap of $1 million. The GOP plan also offsets some of its tax cuts by eliminating deductions for state and local taxes. Those changes will have a big impact on folks living in states with high taxes and high real estate prices, such as New York, New Jersey, and California, among others, which is why several Republican lawmakers from those states have said they will vote against their own party's plan if changes aren't made.
There are some people who say that they're subsidizing from other states. They say that they're subsidizing New York. You look at tax policy and spending policy, and New York is a net contributor, sending more to Washington than we get back.
House leadership has said they are open to making changes, but they also reiterate that you're not going to be able to please everyone, and at some point they'll need to move ahead with whatever it is has the best chance of passing. For now, they plan to try and do that without reaching out to Democrats, who used their weekly address to criticize the GOP plan as a slap in the face to the middle class.
The tax plan released by President Trump and congressional Republicans is not real tax reform. Instead, it cuts taxes for the wealthiest Americans and raises taxes on middle-class families.
We've heard from a number of Republican leaders the past few days, though, who argue their plan does just the opposite of that and will be a boon for the middle class as well as for their families. That argument over how this plan affects the middle class will be a focal point of the debate in the days and weeks ahead. Julie.
All right, Garrett Tenney, thank you very much.
A little more on this now. Liza Collins joins us, the congressional reporter for USA Today. Good to see you, Liza. Thank you. A busy beat, certainly, covering the Congress these days. Oh, my goodness. Now, is there enough opposition from people you talked to on Capitol Hill on the Republican side, to start with the point Garrett made at the top of his report, to really push back on this issue of the deductions? You know, the high tax states, New York, New Jersey, and all the rest. They're upset about it, but do they have enough votes to actually defeat the plan because of that?
I think it's going to be really close, but I don't think as of right now there is enough opposition. Really, the New York and New Jersey Republicans, with a couple other Republicans throughout, are the ones sort of in lockstep against this. The California Republicans have seemed to be on board, and the major thing here is that Republicans need a win. Right. They have not been able to get any major legislation across. While the House did pass an Obamacare repeal, it failed in the Senate, and so Republicans are pretty open about being kind of willing to compromise on things they might not normally have had they had other pieces of legislation. So I think it's going to be really close.
Yep.
But right now, unless there are more major changes, it looks like it can at least pass the House.
Well, they're here. Well, then the Senate, which we'll talk about in a second, could be a different story. But they're hearing, as you know, from all sides. Anytime we have a tax discussion, this is what happens. All the special interests have come out, whether it's yesterday and now into the weekend, making their issues. So the Republicans have a lot to deal with. Here's one Republican congressman out of the state of Arizona talking a bit about that, the pushback. Listen.
A lot of my friends on the left are terrified of the Republicans having a pretty big victory of delivering these tax reductions and something that expands the economy. So there's a lot of push. There's the political side. There's the business community, where it's always trying to push each other.
And that last point, Eliza, I think is important, because we're wrapping up the week thinking that all American businesses would be on board with this. But now I'm not so sure. Some of the small business owners appear to have questions. So what are you hearing about that? Is it as popular as it seemed with the business community?
Well, I think overall, just the fact that the rates go way down is making the business community happier, but to bring those rates way down, there are popular deductions that are maybe specifically like the mortgage deduction. You know, you're seeing real estate groups being upset about that. So to kind of counteract for the big cuts, specific deductions are going to disappear. And so specific special interest groups are not going to be happy. Whether that's enough to make a big change in the bill, we'll have to see.
Whether it's the mortgage industry or other industries, housing, that we're starting to hear from those, as you say, special interest groups. So, you know, we'll have to watch how this kind of plays out, because you have the individual tax rates versus the business tax rates. Is the argument you're hearing from Republicans, you know, within their own caucus, that, you know, we have to pass this for the good of the economy? Is growth their biggest argument, or is it something else?
I think growth is their biggest argument. They are definitely trying to play up the middle class tax cuts, but they're also well aware that they're going to be removing some of these very popular deductions, and middle class families might get a very small tax cut or not one at all. Their argument is by bringing down those cuts for corporations, for small businesses, they'll be able to hire more people, boosting the economy, bringing more jobs, and just that sort of overall growth is what they're really pitching.
Let me go back then to one of the first points you made a few minutes ago. You said this could get through the House, right? But once it does, then you have to deal with the Senate. We all know what happened during the health care debate there. I know it's early, but how are people handicapping what might happen if, in a hypothetical, this does get through the House? How does the Senate really look now?
Well, the House and the Senate have this fascinating sort of dynamic. The House has more Republicans, so they have more padding. It's a lot easier to pass legislation through the House than it is the Senate, where they have a 52-48 majority. Most legislation needs 60 votes. They have to compromise with Democrats. Tax reform, they're going to do on reconciliation, so they can have 51 votes. They can actually even bring that down to 50 with Vice President Pence, but that means they can only lose 2 Republicans. And there is someone like Senator Susan Collins, who is super moderate, and someone like Senator Bob Corker, who is super fiscally conservative and pretty mad at President Trump right now.
Or Jeff Flake, or others that aren't thrilled with the president, right? And John McCain's name always comes up. There is kind of a group of usual suspects. We've been through this before with other issues, right?
Right, they're the usual suspects, and then there are also just people who have concerns, special like fiscal hawks. The House bill has instructions that could add up to $1.5 trillion to the deficit. If you're a fiscal hawk, you're not thrilled with that number, you might sort of plug your nose and vote for it. But the Senate, they like to say the senators all are islands. One person can stop something, and they're not afraid to use that.
No, they're not. Boy, we're not there yet. A lot of twists and turns, it seems like, that are still left with this whole tax debate. Eliza Collins, thanks. We appreciate it. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
All right. Now, the House Speaker, Paul Ryan, I do want to point out, of course, out touting this tax reform plan as a way to help the middle class. And tomorrow, he's on with Chris Wallace. It's an exclusive Fox News Sunday interview. You definitely do not want to miss that. And from the Armed Services Committee, Senator Lindsey Graham, he too will sit down with Chris. That is a exclusive as well. Both interviews, Fox News Sunday. Check your local listings for that, Fox News Channel and the Fox Broadcast Network. And don't miss Vice President Mike Pence. The Vice President is appearing on Sunday Morning Futures here on the Fox News Channel, 10 a.m. Eastern tomorrow morning. So a lot coming up.
Former DNC chair Donna Brazile says she seriously considered replacing presidential nominee Hillary Clinton with Vice President Joe Biden after Clinton fainted while she had pneumonia on the campaign trail. These revelations coming in from Brazile's explosive new memoir, which also alleges Clinton and the DNC rigged the 2016 primary against Bernie Sanders. An excerpt says the Clinton campaign actually took control of the party's finances nearly a year before she won the nomination. Ellison Barber has more from Washington.
Donna Brazile, Hillary Clinton, and the DNC. It's the story most of Washington is talking about. As President Trump headed towards Marine One Friday, he stopped and said this.
You want to look at Hillary Clinton, and you want to look at the new book that was just put out by Donna Brazile, where she basically bought the DNC and she stole the election from Bernie.
Criticism is coming from both sides of the aisle after former interim DNC chairperson Donna Brazile published an excerpt of her new book in Politico magazine. It accused the Clinton campaign and the DNC of entering into, in her words, an unethical fundraising agreement before Clinton won the nomination. The agreement in question was leaked to a number of media outlets. First, NBC News. It said in exchange for helping the deeply in debt DNC raise money, staff with Hillary for America would have, quote, joint authority over strategic decisions like staffing, budget, and communications. The agreement said it applied to the general election and not the Democratic primary. It also said the DNC could enter similar agreements with other candidates. Some Democrats say point blank the DNC rigged the election and changes need to be made.
Very quickly, Senator, do you agree with the notion that it was rigged?
Yes.
We must bring about real campaign finance reform. We must get rid of the undemocratic system of superdelegates.
According to the Washington Post, the DNC chair and deputy chair both pledged to reform the party in light of these allegations. Tom Perez, the DNC chair,